things that you have done with your life. Anyway, thank you very much for coming here. I just wanted to say that the reason why I preferred this not to be a webinar but a normal one is because I would like something a bit more interactive. You don't need to, feel free not to be interactive if you don't want to, but I just wanted a chance to see your faces and be able, if you want to unmute yourself, talk to me or something like that. So today we are talking about languages, and if you're here, I'm sure you are very interested about writing and writing in more than one language. um, I'm gonna share with you a presentation, and so we can see how we are working on today. So um, let's hope I don't mess everything up as sometimes happen with presentation. Okay, here we are. Just to let you know, I can't see the chat now, so I will have to stop sharing and come back in and out. So we are gonna talk about using more than one language in your writing. We are looking especially at why and how, because I believe they are very interconnected. So first of all, hello. As Jana said, the reason why I'm interested in languages is because I'm half Italian and half Palestinian, but I decided to write in English. And not only, but in the past years, I have spent my life with my partner who is Venezuelan with a Russian origin and living in the UK as well. So we speak something around 5, 6 languages in this house. So languages for me are a daily thing. Okay. So let's start with, I want to know more about you, or some of you already wrote down who they are, but I want to know, why are you here, and what would you like to take from or give to this space? Okay, as I say, I wanted this to be interactive, and because we all speak different languages and we all coming here from different paths, I just want to know, what are you here, and especially if there is something specific you want to take out from today, or if there is something that you want to share today. So um, feel free to write it in the chat. I'm gonna give you a couple of seconds, and then I have to stop sharing to read the chat. But yes, let's go ahead. I'm gonna stop so I can start reading some in the chat. I can see people are taking a bit of time. Go ahead. So what I can do, it's also move on to the next slide. So every time I think I will have to, while you are finishing to write your reason why, this is what you are gonna expect from today. We are gonna explore the potential of using languages as a tool of style and creativity. We will look at examples of how authors have inserted other languages in their writing and discuss what works and what doesn't. And then we are gonna have some exercise using those techniques. As I have said, feel free to share your writing and experience, ask questions, comment, suggest other writers, suggest other books. Really feel free to put everything you want in the chat. So what do we want? What we would like to see at the end of the day really is that hopefully you will have a short piece of writing that you can use and rework as a starting paragraph, a starting piece, a sort of checking paragraph where you have all the techniques, and you can always go back to that and see what worked for you, what didn't. So this is what I would like for you today, to have a short piece that in a way it's a test piece that you can rework, relook at, and etc. So I can see chat, so I have to stop sharing and go back in the chat. Let's see. Oh, now there are so many. Okay. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna read them after I gave you the first exercise. I'm a bit conscious of time, so I don't want to spend time while you see me reading your chat. So let's move to the first exercise. the question is very easy. It's why do you write in English? Now, if you are a native English speaker, the question is a bit straightforward. But if you are writing in like if English is not your native language, that it's a good question. Why are you writing in English? Like in my case, why am I writing in English? Why I'm not writing in Italian or in Arabic? And instead, if English is in your native language, or you don't like this question, or like answer the second one, why do you want to incorporate other languages in your writing? I'm sure some of them is already in the answer ahead, but go ahead if you haven't written that yet. Write in the chat, why do you want to write in English, or why do you want to incorporate other languages in your writing? I'm gonna give you 2 minutes to do that. One more minutes. I'm reading some amazing messages and project. It's gonna be a nice event. I hope so, at least. Okay, so looking at the answer in the chat, I can see that you are coming to this workshop from many different perspectives and with many different expectations in mind. So I'm happy to say that we will probably be able to cover most of the questions and the doubts that you have. And if I am not today, because after all we have an hour and a half, then I'm you're going to have my email at the end of today where you can write to me and we can discuss more about it. Yeah, is it absolutely fascinating what I'm reading at the moment in the chat? Yes, great. So let's do it. I have to share again my screen. You're going to see that all day, but that's fine. So we are gonna really look at why and how, because the reason why you want to insert other languages or having a bilingual writing or multilingual writing are extremely connected with your why. You can't decide the how without knowing the why. However, we are gonna start with the how today. We are gonna do some practice. We are gonna make get our hands dirty and experiment with the how first. So before we start though, I'm gonna give you another 2 minutes to do that. I want you to think about a specific piece of writing that you would like to work on. If you don't have that, so if you have it, if you came here with a piece of writing that you already have some issues with and you want to work on, please go ahead and take it. If you instead came here just to experiment, I want you to go and ahead and have a free writing exercise. So free writing, for people who don't know what it is, it's mainly writing non-stop without stopping your judgment self. You just write. If you for some reason get stuck, you keep repeating the last word again and again. So it's a completely liberating, the free writing. It's also not because it doesn't have specific rules, but it's also because it's very liberating. So I'm gonna actually give you a little bit more for this free writing exercise, and I'm gonna give you a writing prompt. So you can feel free to write about whatever you want. If instead you want a writing prompt, the writing prompt, it's a beginning of a dialogue, but again, you can make it whatever you want out of it. I'm gonna write it in the chat. Okay, so that's the prompt. Sorry, what did you say? And instead, again, if you have your own piece already, don't worry about doing a free writing. If instead you want something new to work on, that's the prompt, and I'm gonna give you 3 minutes starting now. You have 1 more minute. If you are in your free writing, keep repeating the last word if you get stuck. Try with another language. If you have written in English so far, try with your French or with your Spanish or with your Arabic or whatever language you are speaking. Try to change if you get stuck. Okay, that was 3 minutes. I saw that someone shared, Jessica, thank you for sharing your little piece of writing. Like whoever wants to share, please go ahead and share it in the chat. Um, you don't need to, but it's some of you want to show, and in a way that we all work, and we all see how the work develop. Please feel free to do it. So moving ahead, now that we have our starting piece, we are gonna look at way of working with it. So we are gonna go through types of, like, types, I call it types, but ways of inserting languages. We are gonna start, we can even call them steps, because we are gonna go from the easiest way, and let's say the one that was considered more traditional, to the hardest one. That doesn't mean quality, okay? I mean, personally, yes, in my opinion, also means quality, but not always. It depends how you use it. So let's go ahead. Example number 1. So this is the quote. I'm gonna use as much as I can Palestinian writers, because that it's my field, but I'm sure you are gonna have example in your mind of the language you are working on. So she peered into the oven, flipping over a batch of za'atar pies she had baked for lunch, while Farida and Nadine sipped chai at the kitchen table. Brew another ibrik, Farida told Isra when she set the za'atar pies on a rack to cool. This is from the book A Woman is No Man by Etta Froome. I'm gonna share with you the bibliography right at the end, so you're gonna have all the names. Another example from another writer. But they played some of the classic with a taht orchestra and some instrumental taqsim. There were enough of us from the Levant that they even play a jafra, and we lit up the dance floor, stomping out a high-stepping dabke. Okay, this is Susan Abul Hawa. The book is Against the Loveless World. Again, I'm going to give you the reference at the end. So what do we notice here? Feel free to write in the chat what you notice here. This is why I notice here. So the language, it's Arabic in this case, and is inserted with single words. Is always in italics, with a meaningful exception, that is the word chai in Woman is No Man. And they're often translated, explain, or we have a glossary at the beginning of the book, like in the case of Susan Abul Hawa, we have a 10 pages glossary at the beginning. And usually words are referring to food or other cultural or traditional elements. So is that clear? Can I have a round in the chat if I can see if that's clear?
Sabrin, could you explain, is it possible to get this presentation, as I'm writing furiously what you've written on your PowerPoint, is it possible to get
Yes, okay. What I'm gonna do, I'm gonna share with you at the end.
Thank you.
Does it make sense? That's great.
Yes.
Okay, so okay, someone else is sharing. Okay, people are, okay, that's great. So I'm gonna put the presentation back up, and I want you first writing exercise. I'm gonna give you 3 minutes to do that again. I want you to relook at the piece you have in front of you and use the technique that these two writers are using. So just to put it back up so you can see it, what I want you to try and inserting single words, insert them in italics, and translate, explain them. So usually what happens, you write them and you give the translation in English, or you write them and you give an explanation in English. And then remember that you can't insert anything else but words referring to food or other cultural and traditional elements. So I'm gonna go again to the example. Oh, sorry about that. Okay. Your piece at the end should look like that. The reason why I say that chai is in a meaningful exception is because chai is not an English word. Is not the Arabic word for tea either. it has a similar sound, but it's not. And so there is no reason why it should not be in italics as well, apart from the fact that it's so recognized as something from Asia, something from the East, that it's considered exotic and just put it in there without any italics. So you can even play with that, okay? Is there any words that are so obviously and so well known as foreigner words that you can insert them without italics? Think about that. In a way, that can be negative, like in this case, because it's make the foreign culture a very flat one. But think about, can you use them differently? Can you use it in a positive way? So I'm gonna give you 3 minutes to work on your little paragraph, on your little piece with this technique. 3 minutes starting now. You have 1 more minute. So I'm gonna change the example so you can see this second quote and work in the way Abul Hawa is working. 1 more minute. Okay, that was a minute. Feel free to copy and paste or to share in the chat. How did it feel? Or Okay. Sorry, Casey. Let me. I see that you. So sorry about that. Yeah. So what we were working on was working with single words to insert in your text, always always in italics, to provide always a translation or an explanation for it. And the words that you are supposed to insert are very specifically referred to food or other cultural and traditional elements. So if you had work on that, please let me know how it went in the chat. If you want to share how this second draft of your piece is coming out, like for what I have seen in the chat, it felt awkward, right? Clunky. Okay, yes. So what I was about to say is exactly that what happens sometimes, because like two of you shared the example of their first draft, and their way of using another language is already more advanced than this one, and yet this one is still the most traditional way of introducing other languages in writing, the most accepted way still. And yes, it feels awkward and clunky and absolutely not natural, especially if you are bilingual and you know that like the two language actually don't interact like that. So I hope that was useful. So we are gonna go into the second example. I'm gonna give you, sorry about that, I got wrong. Okay, I'm gonna give you, sorry about that, for some reason my computer is having a bit of issues. Okay, let me do that first then. So we are gonna go into a second example of a, let's call it step 2. And in this step 2, we're gonna see a more difficult technique, but also in a way more natural technique. Okay, so I'm gonna share with you the screen now. I should have solved my issue here. Yeah. Sorry about this. Okay, example number 2. We are gonna have 2 examples from the same book. Again, I'm gonna go with a Palestinian writer, Isabella Hamad, with The Parisian. And here we are. But Pisson will help you in the first few days. On Monday, je crois qu'il y a une affaire description, and then, tout va de l'avant. There were several words in this speech, sorry, I'm missing a P in speech, that Midhat did not understand. He nodded. Second example from the same book. Khalihi Shway, said Farouk. What? Khalihi Shway? They have just killed our best men. This is not about being one of humanity. We are from the East, every one of us in this room, and we have suffered enough. Lazim, Kuluna, rise up. Okay. What do you notice in these 2 new examples? This is why I notice. Is not one word anymore, is more than one word, even sentences, not in italics. Sorry, I still have the meaningful exception try. No, in this case, we don't have it. There is no italics. There is no translation or explanation. The words and the choice of using foreign words are linked to the context that we are in. And there is an emphasis on cross-cultural communication or identity. So, for example, in the example number 1, the reason that the French is inserted is because the protagonist, Midhat, as we can see here, is not understanding. So the writer is make it in a way that if you don't speak French, you are not gonna understand either, like Midhat. And I remember someone writing in the chat that is talking about immigrants and how sometimes are struggling with the language that of the country they are moving to. This can be a very good example, for example. It doesn't matter if the reader understands it or not, as as long as even the protagonist is not understanding. And then the second example, the Arabic is coming in because they are talking about a strong a strong identity situation. They're talking about the war, and they are talking about what they need to do to defend themselves. And so the Arabic comes in a dialogue. The other thing that you need to notice about this book, okay, that it's very interesting, is that English is the main language, yes, but we have both French and Arabic coming in. So it's not just bilingual, we are already working on 3 languages. So I'm gonna give you a bit more time for that. Okay, just quickly check the chat if it's all, sorry about that, if it's all clear. Yeah, phrases and sentences, yes, that's right. Okay, so I'm gonna give you 5 minutes for this because it's a bit more complex than the previous one. It's not just random words. It's specific, it's longer, and it's linked to the context. So I have seen some of you with the example that you shared already doing that. So it should be for you, for some of you should be more natural. For some of you, maybe the first time that you are actually working on this. And for those, yes, I'm gonna put the list on the screen this time, absolutely. And yes, I'm gonna put the timer on. I'm gonna give you 5 minutes and starting now. You have a minute and 30 seconds. You can, if you have done this exercise already and you're reworking a little bit, remember that you can use more than 2 languages. Is there any reason why you could insert a third language in the mix? Or, for example, dialects? Or have you think about the context that you're using it? Is there any way that the context can influence the languages that you're choosing? Okay, so that was our 5 minutes with our second type. Um, Feel free again to put in the chat how it went. Um, did you enjoy it? Was it harder? Was it easier? How did you feel when you had to insert a language like that? Was it more natural or it was actually a bit harder? Um, Feel free to share it. Just gonna tell you that we are having 2 more steps. So it was harder. Yes, it was harder. Makes sense. Harder. Yes. Because it forces you to think more about the reason why you're using those languages. And this is just step 2 out of 4. We are gonna get harder and harder. Um, yes. Oh, don't worry, David. I'm gonna share the PowerPoint. Hopefully here. Yes, I can share it here in the chat. And also, you don't have a community of foreign language speaker that can communicate like that in your text, or like in your life. Is it you like?
It's both, Sabrin.
Okay.
Sorry, I wrote that. That's why. Yeah, so I'm the only German person I know here. If I speak to any other German people, I will speak purely in German, but I don't have that community of people every day where I would switch languages. So I'm either speaking English with everybody, or every now and then I'll speak to a German person, but then it's one-to-one. So I don't have that mix in my life. So I find it really difficult to come up with an idea of a situation in the writing. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And this is why I think the next example may be a bit more useful for you. So as I said, we are going to work on levels of difficulties, and your situation it's a bit harder because, as you said, in your writing and in your life, that let's say more osmotic exchange is less possible. So you think, oh, I have to create the situation for that to happen. There are other ways to have that language coming in, and you have that language coming in as a writer rather than as a character. So that's a difference that we are going to work on now. So we are going to work on, okay, it's not about my character speaking in other languages, or only about my character speaking another language. It's me as a German speaker writing in English. What does entails? Okay. And that is a very important question, as every writer is interested in language, otherwise we will not be writers. But it becomes even more interesting when we choose a specific language to do that instead of another one. And then we are going to work on that a little bit more now. So I'm going to share again my screen. And you should be able to see now example number 3. It's as you see, it's longer. That's already say something. Oh, sorry about that. Sorry. That already say something about that. So I actually I give you time to read it. I'm not gonna read over it because it's a bit longer. I'm just gonna tell you that come from a book of Ben Lerner that it's called Leaving the Atocha Station, I think it's pronounced. As you can see, the way this writer is working with two languages is completely different. Oh, I can see someone is in the chat. Yes, yes, yes. I can see. Sorry about that. It's my Microsoft team that I was sure I had muted, but it's still sending me notification. I'm gonna work on it. Okay, so as you can see, I want you to notice the what is happening like in the middle of this quotation, right? Like halfway down, we have I looked up the Spanish word for the English word I wanted to replace, and then replaced that word with an English word that approximated its sound. So under the arc of the sky became under the arc of the cielo, which became under the arc of the cello, right? Oh gosh, you see, confusing. So this writer doesn't speak Spanish at all, or does know a very little Spanish, but what is working on is exactly with these misunderstandings, with this inability to actually switch between two languages. This can be a bit more useful in what you were saying, Angela. Like, okay, I don't speak osmotically two languages in my daily life, but how does my brain work between English and German? And this is what he's trying to do. So let's see what we notice. Okay, the language is openly played with. Language becomes part of the story and not only the tools to say it. The difficulties of cross-cultural communication becomes part of the poetic. And this is what I want you to work on now. So this technique has actually been taken by Professor Nicholas Joes from Australia, from Flinders Uni, and he calls it translation plus. So I remember in the chat someone talking about Chinese. So he used this technique with Chinese as well, and we have done a workshop with him. I recognize, like Camilla was with me that day. Mainly he translates from Chinese. He speaks Chinese fluently, but he made us try to translate Chinese even without even knowing anything about it. Just translating, kind of translating the what we saw in the alphabet without knowing, like without not even knowing the alphabet. He make us translate what we saw in that sign, what we saw in those symbols. So this is something else you can work on. If you don't know the language that you want to insert, can you make that not knowing, that impossibility, can you make it into a poetic? And this is what I want you to do with this writing exercise number 3. I want you to write your short paragraph, but can you play with how the words sound? Or can you play with the sentence structure? Or can you play with some missed translation or some miscommunication? Can you actually take the language and work with it? That becomes your content, not only your style. How does that sound? Does it sound like something interesting to do? Should I put 5 minutes? Great, yes. So I'm gonna put 5 minutes now. Sounds excellent, great. I'm gonna give you again 5 minutes because I think again it needs some time. Another thing that you can do, if you have on your desk or around a book in the language that you are working on. So for example, I'm thinking, okay, yes. So I have here, for example, a poetry collection, and I have Arabic on one side and English on the other. Can you take a book like that, or of a language that you don't know, or of a language you are working with, and just translate the sounds, or what does this writing look like for you? The meaning that this writing gives to you without knowing what it says. If you have a book like that around, or you can Google it, you can even try to start inserting in your own writing the translation, your own personal translation plus from another work. So I'm going to give you 5 minutes for that. I'm going to put back the slide so that you see what we are working on. And yes, good luck. 5 minutes start now. 30 seconds left. Sorry, not much. Again, if you're stuck, think about opening a book at random. Play with the words that you see in there. Yes, a few more seconds. Okay, so that was it. Now I'm a bit more curious. If you want to share, go ahead, write it in the chat. How did it go? Was it useful? Did you get something about your languages that you hadn't found before, or was it something that actually was just you felt that it was just a stylistic exercise without much content? Share it. Share some example if you want. I see Jessica shared something very interesting from Danish. Feel free to do the same if you have something similar or not, or something not similar. Nice, Angela. That is exactly what I wanted to hear. Yes, I'm happy that you were able to writing about yourself in a way that was expressing yourself fully. Um, oh, nice. Sorry, I'm just reading examples. I just think they're fantastic. Okay, thank you for sharing. We are not done yet. We have one more step to go. Probably the hardest one. Probably not. It depends really how much you have worked before with languages or how much you are happy to go across languages. So I'm gonna put it on the screen. I couldn't not. I know that there are other examples now, but I couldn't not including Midnight Children from Salman Rushdie. His example of using languages is pretty much incredible. And the quote that I have chosen, it doesn't really give justice to his work, but it was one that had some of his techniques inside, not all of them, but some of them. So you can see he mixes direct speech with indirect speech. He doesn't have any punctuation that help the reader understanding what is happening. He use other languages with translation or without translation. He use words that are referring to food or traditional elements as well as words that are not related to food or traditional elements. I'm reading in the chat if so I see someone is sharing. Oh, it doesn't let me. Sorry about that. Yeah. Oh, nice, Rebecca. I'm glad that you like the exercise. Okay, so back to Rushdie. Yes. So you see, he literally does whatever he can with the language. So let's talk about some of the things that we see. This is called chatnification, but it's the same idea of continuum or interlanguage. These are three ways of naming what is happening there. The main language of narrative is highly infused with another language. The structure and grammars of English loses its contour, and we have neologism, compounds, onomatopoeia, etc. So you have to go crazy now, okay? You have literally take your piece and do everything you can with it. Think about all the techniques that we have used so far. What did it work? What it didn't? Reuse it. invent new word, invents words that are coming from another language and make them English words, or compound them. Can you compound more than one language together instead, I don't know, of saying no, I'm trying to think about compound. It's so hard. But instead of just, for example, one of the compound of Russian is up and down written all together. Can you think about something similar by using more than one language to do that compound? Or what about the sounds of another language? Can you use just the sounds as a word? Okay. Just think about, to play on a very easy way, think about just the way the animals have different sounds in different language. Can you do something like that with other things? Can you insert that in what you're saying? All of that, we are gonna play with it. We are gonna play with it for other 5 minutes. Just write in the chat if you're okay with it, if that makes sense, or sorry, or instead you have question about it, because like, oh, sorry about that. I'm trying to open the chat. I have to stop sharing again. Yeah, from Chatney. Yes, yes. Because Salman Rushdie, of course, is mainly based and mainly write about the Indian situation. So it's called Chatnification, because from Chatney, he's actually spreading Chatney or using Chatney all over English. Yes. It's actually coming from, I think it's from Rushdie. Um, Sorry. Just John, I think you are the host right now by yourself, so I don't have to make you the host. But let me know if instead I have to. Okay. So yes, I think it was Salman Rushdie himself. I have to double check about it though. I'm not 100% sure. That's, you got me out, like you got me in that. Yeah, I'm gonna share the examples with the example. Yes, I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna give you 5 minutes, and so I'm gonna divide 2 minutes and a half with the example and 2 minutes and a half with the list of techniques that he's using. And yes, the other two, the continuum and the interlanguage, we are going to talk about this book in a second, but they all come from this book, The Empire Writes Back. And by the way, The Empire Writes Back is another Salman Rushdie sentence. Okay, so I'm going to put the slide back up again, and I'm going to give you 5 minutes. Sorry. No, I want to go back. Here we are. Okay, I'm going to give you 2.5 minutes with the example, this example, and then I'm gonna give you 2.5 minutes with the list of techniques. So yes, 5 minutes start now. Okay, that was the timer. So I can see some questions are coming up, some doubts are coming up, and this is exactly what we wanted. Okay, we want to understand the why. Why are we doing that? Uh, is it not a risk to get offensive? Is it not? Is it readable? Is it um, is it not too forced? Okay, these are all very legitimate questions. So we are gonna talk a little bit now. Okay, we are gonna have a short discussion. So all these techniques that we have seen so far, they are um, all valid. Okay, they can be all good. But you need to ask yourself why. Okay, so we are going to go back to the why do you want to use other languages in your writing, and what effect do you want to produce. So some were saying writing like that makes the writing incomprehensible. It depends how much you push it, but let's say it does make it incomprehensible. Do you want it to make it incomprehensible for your reader? um, And this is what we need to also think about. Why do you want the reader to experience multiple languages? Um, some of you said, oh, I have immigrants in my writing, so I want to give an idea of the experience. Or my character are simply different cultures, so they need to speak different languages. Yes, but we have seen that there are ways and ways of making them talk different languages. So I would like for you, if you want, to share in the chat what, in your opinion, for what you are doing and from the reader you have in mind, what do you think your English should look like? Or if you're not writing in English, if you're writing another language, how do you think your writing should look like? Because some of you, like, let's say, let's take the case of Ben Lerner. His English was very understandable. He was just talking about his difficult to learn Spanish. Or let's think about Isabella Hamad, the Parisian. She inserted full sentences in French because she wanted the reader to experience the same overwhelming and bewilderment that his character was living. So now think about your reader. Why do you want the reader to experience multiple languages, and what do you want that the reader is going to take from your writing, from your reading? What do you want? How do you want the reader to feel while he's reading, or she's reading, or they are reading? Write it in the chat or keep it for yourself, but think about it for 1 minute. Okay, so I was reading some in the chat. Yes, so I can see that there are different ways of people approaching that. Yes, interesting. So what I can see a lot, there are two main lines here that, to be honest, there can be even one, but let's say there are two lines. One, it's a matter of identity. So language is a matter of identity. So you want the reader to experience an identity that is not just a monolingual identity. You are asking the reader to plunge into more than one culture. Another thing that I was seeing so far, but I see something new is coming. Okay, interesting. So one is identity and experience the culture of the language. The other one, it's a bit more political. Okay, it's we talk. I saw Brexit being named again. We talk about immigration. We are speaking now about a sense of place and therefore displacement. So language have two way of entering the writing. um, One is for identity and one it's for political reason. There are other reasons, of course there are, but I would say that at the moment the language is used in that way. So um, quickly I want to just thinking about the types that we have thought about. So the number one, the single words about food or about cultural elements is very shallow. At the same time, if what you want to represent, for example, it's a tourist going to another country and just trying to use some words, you need a shallow way of representation. So for that scene, probably that technique is the right one, because what you want to show it's actually what a shallow use of language looks like. And you may want, for example, how many we were talking about offensive way of using language and mocking way, but how many times when you say that, oh, I'm not English, I'm Italian, for example, how many times, oh, pizza, mozzarella, that is the same shallow way of using the language. Can then therefore it may be useful to use it in a scene if that is what is happening. um the second example, that it's inserting full sentences and that without translation, and we have seen that is highly linked with what the protagonist is experiencing. So for example, if your protagonist again is experiencing misunderstanding, is not understanding something, well, maybe it's good to put full sentences that are not viable for the majority of readers or for readers who don't speak that language. um, Yes. So I can see Rebecca, let's say, avoiding the tourist approach, avoiding the stereotype. Therefore, how can you use the language in that way? So I would say that probably one of the most useful technique is actually the third one, showing the language, how language works. So I'm trying to think about it. Another example on top of Ben Lerner use of that technique, but you can actually talk about it. So you don't just need to use the language as a tool. Can you talk about it? Can you make it part of what you're writing? Can you, for example, have a dialogue about misunderstanding in a language? Or if, as me, you are writing English but English is not your first language, can you have a scene, a paragraph, a short couple of pages that talk about the difficulties of writing in English and probably using some of the mistakes, or having a scene that portrays some of those difficulties? Make the language part of the content. And then the final one, that it's the chatnification or the continuum, as we saw, um, that it's very hard to master without sounding gibberish, really. And for someone, before someone asks, is that not offensive? I would say it is if you don't work on the language properly. So if you're just appropriating other languages, to do that technique in a meaningful way, you have to speak that language. You can't just inserting random stuff in your text. You have to know the language, and you also have to know its historical and social value. And this is why for Rushdie works very well, because it's not inserted randomly. So again, think about the why, think about the context, and try to insert the language following that. So not just think about the how. Yes, play with it, play with the hows, play with techniques, play with methods, but then go back to your why. Why are you using that language? And then rework your text, thinking about, okay, what I'm trying to do is speaking about deeply about a foreign identity and that I'm not part of, for example. So can you talk about the difficulties of approaching another culture? Can you talk about the difficulty of approaching another language through language? Uh, this is all things that you have to think about, and then look back at your techniques and try to insert. Another good question that I saw, it was, oh, do I need to use all of that in my book? Like all my books should all be like that. It's up to you, really. To be honest, I always prefer small scene because, again, you have to link it to the context that you are working on. It can't just you can make it a style if let's say your main character is also the narrator and you want to talk about, and that is his way of talking, that's his way of thinking, then go ahead and do it. But if instead it's more in dialogues or it's more in specific encounters, that use it specifically for that. Um, does all of that make sense? Is that useful? Yes, that's great. So I am a bit aware of time now, but it's not much left. I want to share with you two more quotes. One is, code switching is an artistic choice with political ramification. So when you use with it, as a writer in your practice, play with it. But when you're going to put it on the page, remember that it has consequences. So yes, it can be offensive and if it's not done properly. So think carefully about your why, your reader, and your how. And if you're writing about another culture, as usual, go and talk with people. Try to contact people that are from the culture. What do they experience when they have to confront English? And then the second quotes for me is very meaningful. And the development of a creative language is not a striving for competence on the dominant tongue, but a striving towards appropriation in which the cultural distinctiveness can be simultaneously overridden and overwritten. So, of course, if we talk about appropriation in this case of a dominant tongue, not the other way around, okay? That's very important. So English is considered a dominant tongue. So if English is not your first language, don't be timid. Don't feel overwhelmed by it. Use is, again, is not a striving for competence. It's striving to appropriate the dominant tongue and make it a creative tool. So use it, play with it. And then, yes, that we talk about it, that you can use more than one of this technique. And now I give you 2 minutes. Yes, look at your piece one more time. Think about the reason why and the story that needs to be told, and try to rewrite it. 2 minutes. Okay, so that was it. If you want to share something, you have 4 minutes now. You can unmute yourself and talk if you want. You can share it in the chat, but I want to know, how did it feel? Was it challenging? Was it useful? I'm gonna also share with you quickly the link of the presentation. So you have it while I wait for some people. Yeah, okay, great. So I'm gonna give you a link in the chat. Great. Okay, I see. Yeah, it is challenging. Okay, it is very, very challenging. It took me nearly 3 years to master the style for my book. My book is in English, but it has big chunks in Italian and Arabic. And sometimes there are dialogues where there is Italian, Arabic, and English all in one go. And it took me 3 years to master it. And also um, to understand when translation was actually needed, when translation was not needed, when you needed just one word to give the whole sense, or when you needed a couple of words, or when you needed a sentence. It's a very strong work of balance. Okay, so I have put the link of the presentation in the chat. You can access it. I'm gonna share the screen one more time. Let me do that. Okay, so it's loading. Okay, here we are. Unfortunately, for some reason, this presentation doesn't let me show all the works cited, but there are all the works that I have talked about, so you will be able to go and look for them. And yeah, thanks. And you have my Twitter handle, and you have my email if you need it. And thank you very much. It was very nice to have this time with you today, and I hope it was useful for you. And if you have questions, if you want more information, if you want to have a talk about it, just text me on Twitter,